Hello, this is Keir from XenForo, and this is the second of our Have You Seen videos for XenForo 2.3. If you haven't already seen the first video in the series, then I'll leave a link up in the top corner there, and I would recommend that you go and check that out before you move on to this one. While our previous video concerned itself with a very visual feature, namely our new style variation system and its ability to support dark mode switching, today I'm going to talk about something far more behind the scenes, namely performance improvements. Before we go on to 2.3, let's just see where we are with 2.2. This is XenForo 2.2 running on XenForo.com itself, and I'm going to run a Lighthouse performance analysis on this list of threads. Lighthouse will now load the page and check how long it takes to do various things, and then give us a performance score out of 100. It's going to give us 84 right now. I've run this several times today, and I've seen scores for this same page of a range between 83 and 87, depending on network conditions, I suspect. To put that in context, I've looked at some other forum packages, and for their own thread list pages, I've seen scores ranging from 69 up to 92. So a score of 84 puts us out there with the front runners on the performance race, but with XenForo 2.3 we've gone much further and made this much faster. The first performance improvement I want to talk about today is our use of iconography. In XenForo 2.2, we serve up as many as 5 different variations of the complete Font Awesome 5 Pro icon library. And if you have a look at the library, you can see there are absolutely bucket loads of icons. In fact, as many as 8,000. And the size that we have to transmit with a page in order to serve those icons is around about 200 kilobytes of font and about 40 kilobytes of CSS. Now you may ask, why don't we just ship a smaller subset of those icons to represent just the ones that we actually use? And the reason that we don't do that is that we know that third-party styles and add-ons make use of the Font Awesome icon library and include icons that we couldn't possibly know that they're going to include. So if we stripped down the fonts to just what we use, we'd be limiting their usefulness for the intended purpose of XenForo, which is to be expanded. A few years ago, we prototyped something that worked in a very similar fashion to the excellent Font Awesome Manager add-on that was released by Kirby, but ultimately, after we'd played around with it, we decided that this wasn't actually the way that we wanted to proceed. In XenForo 2.3, we've developed a brand new way of subsetting Font Awesome so that the only icons which are actually delivered to your end users are the ones that are used by your specific XenForo installation, including any third-party styles or add-ons or customizations that you've made. And what's more, it does it entirely automatically. XenForo 2.3 has an icon usage analyzer, which looks at the entirety of your installation and analyzes which icons are being used across all your content types within less templates and HTML templates, your template modifications, and even in JavaScript. So, for example, any templates that include the FA icon, or any less templates that include the MFA content mix-in, will all have those icons registered and included into our subset. Now this does mean that when you are developing template, you're going to have to be a little more strict in the way that you address Font Awesome, otherwise the analyzer won't pick up your uses. So for example, an old approach might have been to simply do an I tag with a class of FA comments or something like that. That will no longer work, or at least it won't get picked up by the analyzer. So if you refer to the developer documentation when it's released, you'll see the various different approaches that you can use to make sure that your use of Font Awesome is picked up by the analyzer and the icons that you intend to have delivered are in fact delivered. That said, this being XenForo, even the icon analyzer itself is extensible, so if you have a particular use that you want to use, then you can extend the icon analyzer to support your case. So how are we going to store these new subsets of icons? Well, instead of generating a new clunky font file that is difficult to work with, instead we are building individual SVG Sprite Sheets for each of the Font Awesome styles. Not only that, but of course, the individual sprite sheets only include the actual icons that are used from that style. So if we take, for example, the regular SVG here, you'll see that it is absolutely packed with all the various icons that are in use by the XenForo style. Whereas if we take the solid style, there are only 2 icons in it. As a result, whereas in order to deliver those icons with XenForo 2.2, we would have to load a 137 kilobyte font file, with XenForo 2.3, the sprite sheet is only 726 bytes. Altogether, the total file size of iconography that we were delivering in XenForo 2.2 for the forum homepage was around about 400 kilobytes. With XenForo 2.3, it's less than 40. And just to show you how automatic this system is, let's take another look at the solid SVG. We've got just 2 icons in there, but let's go and find another one. Let's go and grab volume up, and let's see if I can copy that, and then head into the template editor, and I'm going to paste that in. Now, as I said before, we can't use that syntax, but we can use xffa icon equals, and then we'll get rid of that. Save this out, and I'll come back to my editor, close down that version, and bring it in again, and now the icon is built. The next thing I want to talk about is JavaScript performance. A long time ago, standards dictated that best practice was to place your script tags right at the bottom of your HTML. The reason for doing that was that it gave your page a chance to load up all of the content before it was paused in order to load up these various scripts. Thankfully, that system is now deprecated in favor of the defer keyword. And if we have a look at the source of XenForo 2.3, you can see that our scripts are loaded early using defer. As a result, the browser will start downloading the scripts earlier, but defer the execution until the entirety of the DOM is loaded, making for a faster page load time for your end users. The next thing that we've changed is that we have implemented lazy loading for our JavaScript handlers. In previous versions of XenForo, a huge chunk of our JavaScript code was considered to be core, which loaded on every single page. In XenForo 2.3, we've built a system for lazy loading common handlers when they're needed. They're still grouped into form, action, structure, and tooltip handlers, but rather than all of these handlers being loaded on every page regardless, they're now only loaded and registered if they are actually required on the current page. This, therefore, represents a significant saving on the amount of data that's being transferred from your server, the amount of JavaScript that's being executed, and therefore a faster and snappier response time for your end users. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you might have noticed something very important missing from our list of script tags there. If we go back to 2.2, I can point it out. But with 2.3, it's finally come time to say goodbye to it. Since the very earliest version of XenForo, we have relied upon jQuery to provide essential JavaScript functionality. JavaScript, at the time that XenForo was new, was far less mature than it is now, and jQuery was a very useful library to use in order to work around the eccentricities and foibles of legacy browsers and to support essential functionality like being able to pick a specific HTML element by its class name. However, all that functionality comes at a cost, and while jQuery is only 30k when it's minified and zipped, the actual amount of code when it's fully expanded is colossal. And not only does that have a cost in terms of the amount of data that needs to be transferred, but it also has a measurable cost in terms of the amount of JavaScript that has to be executed. So, XenForo 2.3 does not ship with jQuery at all. If you're a third-party developer and you rely upon jQuery to provide functionality for your add-ons, now would be the time to start thinking about migrating over to native JavaScript. So the entirety of XenForo and all of our first-party add-ons have now been migrated entirely away from jQuery, and we're using solely vanilla native JavaScript. Commonly used functions like the $function to query a selector have now been replaced by the vanilla query selector and query selector all. We've rewritten our event handler, and I would encourage everyone to look into the code that we've written. But we'll also be engaging with you in the developer channels on the XenForo community forums to help with any migration teething problems. One thing that I can tell you about, but I can't show you because my personal web server isn't set up properly, is a change we've made to the way that we load CSS. If I load XenForo 2.3 here, you'll notice that the CSS is being loaded with a variable argument that tells it to load various different pieces of template. So we have share controls and the XFMG media list and various other things all coming through in the query string, and the server behind the scenes will be rolling that up into one CSS file and spitting it out in one go. Once upon a time, that was the best approach because you wanted to minimize the number of actual requests that would be sent to your server. But with the advent of HTTP 2, that is no longer the optimal way to work. So what XenForo 2.3 does is it will now load up the core CSS as a single request as before, but any additional CSS that is requested by individual pages will be multiplexed and sent out as individual files. And those individual files can be individually cached, which works around a problem that we've had before where we would be sending the same data as part of multiple different files. For example, if you had a CSS request that wanted notices.less and share controls, then it would be sent as one file and that would be cached. But then if you wanted notices on its own, that would be sent again, and the browser would have no idea that it had already received that code as part of that previous package. Now that they're individual files, the browser can keep track of what it's already seen and cache them accordingly, which in the long run makes things faster. There's more details in the Have You Seen forum regarding the changes that we've made, but what you're really wondering now is how has our score improved from the 84 I showed you at the beginning of the video? Well, how does 99 sound? Let's do another page just to make sure that wasn't a fluke. Here's the thread list as before, and the result is 99 again. How about the forum homepage? Will that fare any worse? Let's check it out. That looks like a fairly solid 99 again to me. So I hope that this run through of the various performance improvements that we've made for XenForo 2.3 has been interesting and informative. A better Lighthouse score will improve your rankings on Google and will of course provide a better experience for your end users. If you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so that you can be notified when our next Have You Seen video comes out, in which we're going to unveil another public-facing feature. So I'll see you then.